To handle small challenges, such as, for example, deciding whether to finish a piece of essay that you started in class, you could always think about the consequences, the best and worst case scenario. And you can ask questions such as, will I regret this, and that sort of thing, because these will usually be enough to get you to commit. But for bigger challenges, such as if you have a coursework deadline in 3 weeks, or if you think that a teacher doesn't like you and that sort of thing, then these will require more commitment, and there are 6 steps you can take to handle them. To solve a problem or handle a challenge, firstly you have to be solution focused. Now what I mean by that is, you want to focus on the solution and not the problem. Why things can happen and not why things can't. Now we've already discussed why this is so important earlier. The second thing is, you want to have an ideal outcome in mind. What would you like ideally, such as you'd like over 90% in your coursework, or you'd like your teacher to recognise your efforts and help you when you need it, and that sort of thing. Now this is so important because firstly, if it's your ideal case, if you're putting all the effort in, you might as well get an ideal result. And secondly, it sort of helps you measure your success. Now, attitudes. You should always see a problem as a challenge because it's the same thing. They both require effort for you to overcome. The difference is that with a challenge, you want to solve it. With a problem, you have to solve it through desperation. And obviously, if you want to do something, if it's your choice, then you're going to have more commitment into doing it. It's like scheduling, which we're going to come on to. Firstly, if you schedule things, you won't have half these problems anyway, because let's say you'll never be in a case where you're 3 weeks away from a deadline, because with the schedule you'll overcome that. Firstly. Secondly, with a schedule, because you want to do it, because it's your choice, you're going to have more commitment. Now, another thing about seeing things as challenges and not as problems. If you see your exams at the end of the year as a challenge, as an opportunity for you to grow, can you see how a difference in your attitude can make such a big difference in your results? That's why it's so important. The last thing is about attitudes is blaming others. Now you should never blame others, firstly because it doesn't solve the problem, and secondly because it sort of makes your success dependent on others, which is again something you don't want to have. Give yourself as many options as possible and then analyse them to see which is the best one. Now with the coursework example, one option could be to avoid it, but the problem is that it just gets worse and worse. You could deny it and seek sympathy and that sort of thing. The problem is that it'll just erupt the night before the deadline, right? So you have to analyse, and when you're analysing, you have to ask which one of these solves the problem. So if you're more solution focused, you can think of a strategy and a schedule to keep to solve it. Or if we take the teacher's example again. Now, firstly, if you have a problem in a class with a teacher, if you just think of it intellectually, if you don't make it personal, if you take the emotions out of it and ask, would a teacher that doesn't like students and doesn't want students to learn actually teach? You'll realise that it's just a destructive excuse you have. So to solve it, you have to think of as many alternatives as possible of why that may be. So for example, are you always on time? Do you always have your equipment? Do you always have your notes? Do you always produce a high quality piece of homework? Are you up to date with your coursework? Or are you distracting? What sort of attitude do you have when you walk into the class? That sort of thing. That way, you won't see the problem so big. You'll have all these alternative things that you can control and you can work on. And once you've gone through all these, because it's solution focused, the problem will not only become insignificant, but you'll actually see that, no, the problem wasn't a personal thing, it was the things that I was doing. The 5th step is for you to actually make a decision based on your options. Now, not making a decision is an actual decision, and it mustn't be an option. It's deciding to avoid it, which we all know has negative consequences. So any challenge, any big challenge that requires commitment and effort, the reasons for going ahead with it must be greater than the reasons against. And the way you do that is, you have to have a long list of reasons of why you must make it work. Now, the last step is for you to measure, document and acknowledge what you've done. You measure it by seeing where you are and seeing where you ideally want to be and seeing the difference. Now you keep anything that's working and you just don't keep anything that's not. You have to be flexible. Anything that's not working, you have to change your strategy until it works. Now you want to also document all you've done. You want to document all the reasons you had for making it happen and any results that you've got as well, so that you can use it in the future if you have a similar problem. The last thing is you want to acknowledge what you've done. You want to realise that there was this problem, you had a strategy and now you've got the result, so that next time you can deal with it with even more confidence.